Hey, 7th grade, Mr. Hildebrand here. This video is for Tuesday the 29th. In case you missed the Zoom lesson or you were out sick, is what we're up to today. Real quick, I just want to show you, if you're trying to keep up with our myths, we did watch the myth of Sisyphus. You can find that if you type in CU in history. We watched one of theirs. Excellent myth. Characters that you can choose for your project in a couple weeks, but don't worry about that yet. Today we were kind of reviewing a little bit about Philip II and how he lived in that kingdom of Macedonia, and he was the king. And he lived in Greece for a couple years in the city of Thebes, and he loved the language and the culture, the philosophy, but he looked around and he saw that Greece was very weak. Remember, this is after the 30 Years' War, where the Peloponnesian War, where Sparta and Athens and everybody, they're fighting each other, made their governments weak, made their militaries weak. And so Philip says, you know what, I can make Greece strong again, and I can spread their culture and their influence, but I have to be the leader. Now, some people are going to like Philip, and they're going to think he's a strong guy, a smart guy, and some people are going to be scared of him. They're going to think that he's going to come in and harm Greece. So we reviewed a couple of the things he did to get power. He did have a professional army. They perfected the phalanx, which is where they form a kind of a tight grid, interlock their shields. They have the long spears that they can fight with over top. Very effective. He also would bribe other cities' officials with gold to try to get power. He would cause fights between cities, and then when they were weak, he'd go attack them. He would make treaties and stab those friends in the back. Then he also would get power through marriage, through political alliances. So he was marrying a lot of different women to try to be part of the royal families to get power that way. Now, we talked about how Demosthenes and some other people in ancient Greece spoke out against him, said, hey, these things are wrong. There were some people who supported him, said, hey, he'd be a great leader. Didn't matter, because in 338, he ends up invading Greece and taking over all the cities. Now, once he does that, he decides he wants to take on Persia next, because Persia's still out there, and they're still the biggest, strongest empire in the world. But before he can attack Persia, he dies. But Philip is going to have a son named Alexander. Now, we watched a quick video on Alexander by World Ahoy, so if you type in World Ahoy, Alexander the Great, you'll be able to catch up on that. Alexander takes over when he's 20 years old, and he was a student of Aristotle, who we'll talk about in a week or two. And Alexander is going to crush the Persian Empire. He already owns Greece, he already owns Macedonia, and he's going to take over all of Persia within about 13 years. So it doesn't take him long to take over the largest empire in the world. Now, eventually his soldiers get kind of tired. They refuse to go any further east, so they turn around, quick pit stop at home, Macedonia and Greece, and then he does go down to Egypt and take over Egypt as well. Now, Alexander the Great, he wants to unite Macedonia, Greece, the Persians, Egypt. He wants to bring all these people together and kind of make one empire that's kind of peaceful for him to rule. So one of the things he does to try to do that is he tries to assimilate into the Persian culture, where he tries to make an effort to show that he understands them and he cares for them. So he would allow Persian soldiers to join his army, so giving them a job. He also married a Persian woman and followed a lot of the Persian customs, because he wanted to show that, for the biggest part of his empire, that he was making an effort to include them, right? And at least understand them and their culture. Now, there's some things that Alexander does that people don't like. For example, he did believe he was a god. This stemmed from stories that his mother told him when he was a kid. His mother would tell him, hey, Philip's not your real dad. One of the Greek gods is. So Alexander grew up believing that he was a god. Now, the Greeks, they already had their gods and goddesses. They also knew Philip, Alexander's actual dad. And they said, hey, you're not a god. You're Philip's kid. So we're not going to worship you like a god. The Macedonians pretty much had the same feelings about that. They said, hey, you grew up here. We know you. We know your dad, Philip. Who are you fooling with this whole god bit? So they refused to worship him. The Greeks also did not like the fact that he was treating the Persians so well. Remember, Greeks and Persians, enemies. They went to war for years and years and years. So the Greeks were a little mad that the Persians were being treated as well as they were. And the Greeks had a reputation for not respecting anybody who didn't speak Greek or follow the Greek religion or customs. So for them, they were still xenophobic, were scared of the Persians, and so they didn't like that Alexander was buddies with them. Now, we did talk about some of Alexander's accomplishments. Even though he had this division in his empire, he's still going to found over 70 cities, and we looked at some of those cities' names, and a lot of them are based on his name, Alexandria, or some form of that, and you can find those all on Wikipedia. And so this guy, he definitely had a high opinion of himself. And the most famous of his cities was Alexandria in Egypt. Now, when Alexander dies, he's going to die in 323 BC, and he gets sick. And there's no heirs, there's no children to pass on his empire to. And so his empire gets split into 3 parts, and therefore becomes weaker. Seeing that weakness, the Greek cities, they do rebel, and they do get their independence. It won't be for long, because eventually the Romans will come and take them over. But we'll get to the Romans later. But if I skip ahead real quick, I did want to just highlight that this time period, during and right after Alexander the Great, he did spread the Greek culture a lot. And the influence of Greek thinking and religion and language and science and philosophy and art did spread all over his empire. So we call this the Hellenistic age. It means to be like the Greeks. So a lot of people were adopting and using Greek ideas. Now, we did also look at Alexandria, the city that in Egypt is the most famous city. It was a port city or a harbor city where lots of shipping and trading and sailing was going on. Very famous lighthouse, one of the 7 ancient wonders of the world. We'll see kind of a computer model of it in a second. Also a very famous library where lots of scholars would come from all over the world to learn. This actually was a kind of VR. We looked at what Alexandria looks like now. Okay, it's more like a modern city, but you can tell it is on the coast, right on the coast, and it is in Egypt. This was Alexander's empire. So he started up here in Macedonia. His dad took over the Greek cities. Then Alexander goes and takes over the entire Persian Empire, comes back, takes over Egypt as well. And so this is just his massive empire. This is an artist's representation of maybe what the library in Alexandria looked like. Scrolls, books from ceiling to floor, people coming to study from all over the world. But there was a tragic fire that happened, and so it did get destroyed. So unfortunately, we lost a lot of that. And then this was the image of the lighthouse, okay, what they believe it looked like, safely guiding ships into port. Just made it a very powerful, very strong city. Folks, just one quick reminder, your Philip II speech, I am grading it tomorrow. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go to the Week 5 assignments page, Module 5, Week 5, go to the assignments page, and it's got a video and direction sheet and stuff on there to help you out. We will have a test on Friday. I don't want you to freak out. Tomorrow and Thursday, we're going to study together. Friday, I'll be on the Zoom helping to answer your questions or anything you need. All right, folks, if you have any questions, need help, just send me an email. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow.